Okay, picture this. Xerxes, the king of kings, right? He's standing there on the European shore. And he's actually weeping as this enormous army, hundreds of thousands of men, this huge fleet, starts crossing the Hellespont.
Yeah, it's quite an image.
He had the saying, big things are won by big dangers. He genuinely believed his massive goals, conquering all of Europe, were basically the same as his ability to do it.
A total mismatch between ambition and, well, reality.
Exactly. And this overconfidence, this thinking that aspirations equal capabilities, it led to just a catastrophic failure. We're talking hundreds of thousands dead, almost his entire navy gone. He just didn't see the limits. Welcome to the deep dive. This is where we take your sources, dig into them, and pull out the key insights so you can get informed fast.
And today, we're diving into John Lewis Gaddis's book on grand strategy, which is honestly a fantastic read.
It really is. And it's not just ancient history or, dense theory. It's kind of a shortcut to understanding how leaders way back then and right now deal with massive challenges. So our mission today is to unpack 4 big themes Gaddis explores. Themes that are still pretty controversial, actually, and they really get at the heart of strategic thinking, leadership, history, even the choices you make every day.
Okay, let's get into it. What Gaddis does so well is distill these timeless strategic principles. And the first one is maybe the most fundamental.
Which is?
It's this constant tension, this balancing act between your ends and your means.
Ah, yes, the goals versus the resources.
Exactly. Aligning what you ultimately want to achieve, the ends, with the actual practical stuff you have to work with, the means. Your resources, your methods. Gaddis puts it perfectly. Ends and means have to connect if anything is to happen.
But they're not interchangeable.
Never. He talks about proportionality, defining it as the alignment of potentially infinite aspirations with necessarily limited capabilities. It's about matching huge dreams with finite reality. And that's, well, it's hard. Often unpopular.
And Xerxes, who we started with, he's just the poster child for getting this disastrously wrong, isn't he?
Absolutely. Tragic example.
His mistake seems so simple in hindsight. He just assumed his aspirations were his capabilities. He was stuck in the present, totally ignoring past experience or, what might happen next.
The unforeseen. He only really understood scarcity, limits, when things started going wrong. The land, the sea, the weather, the Greeks fighting back.
Yeah, that's when reality introduced him to scarcity. And the result? Over 900 ships lost, 250,000 soldiers dead. Just staggering. He crossed his own Hellespont, didn't he? That point of no return.
He did. It's a stark lesson. Gaddis contrasts him with thinkers like Augustine. St. Augustine writing The City of God.
Right, thinking about the afterlife.
Exactly. Augustine was grappling with how you align limited human capabilities, us mere mortals, with this completely unlimited aspiration, eternal life. It shows that ends means tension on almost a spiritual scale.
And then there's Machiavelli, often seen as, maybe a bit ruthless.
The pragmatist, yeah. Maybe the sinner, as Gaddis puts it. But he also stressed proportionality. For Machiavelli, virtue, that sort of effective political skill, meant doing what's required when facing necessity, but not in all respects at its mercy.
So being tough when you have to be, but not just randomly cruel.
Right. He famously said, a prince must learn when not to be good, and that timing is everything for cruelty or benefits. It was all about aligning sometimes brutal means to a very clear end, keeping the state secure. Survival.
It makes sense. And this isn't just ancient history or Italian city-states. Think about American leaders. Lincoln, for instance.
Oh, definitely.
Civil War, the country falling apart, an existential crisis. His main goal, his end, was saving the Union, period.
Paramount objective.
So his decision, his really controversial decision, to frame the Emancipation Proclamation as a military necessity, not just a moral crusade, even though he personally wished all men everywhere could be free. That was pure ends means calculation.
A profound example. Using his war powers, the means to achieve the ultimate end, saving the nation, which eventually led to freedom. He bent the how for the what.
Yeah. And FDR facing World War II.
Another great case. Gaddis calls him a juggler, someone who maybe didn't always let his right hand know what his left hand does.
Yeah. Sounds familiar in politics.
But his ultimate end was clear: win the war. And for FDR, Gaddis says, ideological purity was less important than geography, balances of power, and the requirements of navies.
So alliances with complicated figures, difficult choices.
Absolutely. He leveraged the contradictions and antagonisms among the authoritarians like Stalin to defeat Hitler. Yeah. It shows that even complex leaders need that guiding star, that ultimate end, to justify their flexible means.
Okay, so bringing this to today, you see this everywhere, right?
Yeah.
Tech companies aiming for the moon, these moonshot projects, but they crash because they didn't have the practical means or they underestimated the obstacles.
Or, think about global conflicts. Idealistic goals for intervention running smack into the messy reality on the ground with limited resources and political will. It's the same struggle.
Gaddis really forces you to confront that uncomfortable truth, doesn't he? Grand strategy isn't just picking morals or necessity. It's about the messy, difficult art of knowing how and when to bend one to serve the other for a bigger goal.
It is messy.
Yeah.
And that's why it's still controversial. When is it okay to compromise your means for a greater end? Lincoln compromising on slavery initially to save the Union. It's a tough one. Where's the line?
Exactly. How do you even make that call? So the question for you is, when you set out on something big, how do you know if your ends are proportional to your means? Are you being realistic, or are you maybe risking your own Hellespont crossing without realizing it?
Good question.
So from that tricky balance of ends and means, Gaddis takes us to another core tension in strategy. It's actually perfectly shown by Xerxes again. It's this classic dilemma. Should you be a hedgehog or a fox?
Ah, the famous distinction.
Yeah, this is where it gets really interesting. Our second theme. Isaiah Berlin made it famous, borrowing from the ancient Greek poet Archilochus. The hedgehog knows one big thing, has a single driving vision.
While the fox knows many little things. It's adaptable, sees nuance, pivots.
And there's research on this too, right? Philip Tetlock.
Yeah, Tetlock found that foxes tend to be better forecasters. Why? Because they're more self-critical thinkers. They're more likely to update their beliefs based on new information.
Yeah.
They don't get locked into one view.
But Gaddis adds a twist. He points out that Berlin himself later said, look, some people aren't just one or the other, some are both.
Right, and Gaddis argues that real strategic intelligence needs both. The hedgehog's sense of direction and the fox's sensitivity to surroundings. Plus, crucially, the ability to function while holding both.
You need the destination, but you also need to navigate the terrain.
Exactly.
The contrast between Xerxes and his uncle Artabanus really nails this. Xerxes, total hedgehog. All about the big plan, the big explanation, conquer everything. But he kept digging himself into holes, ignoring inconvenient details.
While Artabanus was the fox, he saw all the potential problems, rivers drying up, storms, the enemy fighting back. He anticipated lots of little dangers.
But couldn't offer a single, coherent alternative strategy. He lacked the big picture.
Their tragedy, as Gaddis says, was that each lacked the other's proficiency. Neither could hold opposing ideas in mind and still function effectively. They were stuck at the extremes.
So who got it right? Gaddis points to strategists like Sun Tzu.
Ah, the art of war.
Sun Tzu managed to balance both. He leaves enough options to satisfy any fox, flexibility, but he maintains the purposefulness of a hedgehog. He understood that things get complex quickly. Simplicities mix, complexities become endless. But sticking to core principles keeps you from getting lost.
That makes sense. Octavian, who became Emperor Augustus, is another great example of this balance.
How so?
Well, unlike Alexander the Great, who apparently learned limits only through failures, just pushing until he broke, Octavian saw constraints while seeking successes.
So he was ambitious but realistic.
Yes, and Gaddis notes, on those few occasions when he did lose sight of them, quickly self-corrected. He grabbed opportunities very foxy, but always kept his main objectives in mind, very hedgehog. He had that flexible direction.
Gaddis also brings in Queen Elizabeth I ruling England, a relative microstate at the time.
She was incredibly foxy. She readily yielded authority in some areas, letting things develop organically, but always kept ultimate control. Her famous dithering, especially over marriage.
People criticized her for being indecisive.
Right, but Gaddis argues it was often strategic pivoting, keeping options open. Brilliant foxiness. Contrast that with her rival, Philip II of Spain.
Ruler of a massive macrostate.
Huge empire.
Yeah.
But he was a total hedgehog, a micromanager, obsessed with serving God's interests exactly as he saw them. And because he was so rigid, he often lost track of what he had to do, practically. Couldn't adapt.
And Lincoln, again. You called him the ultimate fusion earlier.
I think he was. His hedgehog vision was crystal clear. Save the Union. And eventually end slavery. A house divided against itself cannot stand. That was non-negotiable.
But his methods?
Pure fox. Deals, compromises, political maneuvering, maybe even, as the Spielberg movie shows, some bribery and arm twisting to get the 13th Amendment passed.
Gaddis says Lincoln drew strength from contradictions, gave him an amplitude, a breadth that his rivals lacked. It raises a point, though, those foxy tactics, the deals, the maneuvering, maybe even the lies. Is that just the cost of doing business in grand strategy?
Gaddis seems to suggest it often is, a pragmatic necessity. The fox sometimes has to get its paws dirty to achieve the hedgehog's noble goal. It's a tough balance. Think about Woodrow Wilson versus FDR again.
Wilson the hedgehog.
Often, yes. Possessed by his bright, coherent dream, like the League of Nations, but maybe able to ignore a good deal of what goes on outside him, which led to failure.
Whereas FDR?
The ultimate fox, the juggler, couldn't let his right hand know what his left was doing. But crucially, he saw better than anyone relationships of everything to everything else. He could adapt, connect the dots, and ultimately succeed.
So in the modern world, you see this play out all the time. A big established company, maybe like IBM back in the day, acts like a hedgehog, clinging to its old model, while nimble foxes, the startups, run circles around it.
Or the opposite, a startup that pivots constantly, chasing every new trend, all fox, no hedgehog, and eventually just burns out because it lacks a core direction.
It fuels that endless debate. What is strong leadership? Is it unshakable conviction? Or is it agile adaptation? When does sticking to your guns become just being blind?
Yeah, it's a critical question. So thinking about your own life, your own decisions, do you lean more hedgehog or fox? Are you too rigid maybe? Or perhaps too flexible, lacking that firm direction?
It's definitely something to think about. And it leads us right into the third theme, overreach.
Ah, the danger zone.
Exactly. This is all about the perils of unchecked ambition. When your aspirations just completely outstrip your capabilities, your means, it leads to strategic collapse.
It's that belief that, Hellesponts are there to be crossed, no matter the cost, no matter the risk.
And Gaddis suggests it often comes from not being able to tell the difference between a smart retreat and orderly disengagement and just giving up entirely abject capitulation.
Right. And who's our prime example yet again?
Xerxes, of course. His goal of doubling its extent, conquering everything, led him to build an army and navy so massive they literally couldn't be sustained by the lands they moved through.
He didn't balance aspirations and capabilities.
Yeah.
He thought he was strong in all respects, had no backup, held none in reserve. So when one part failed, it caused a cascade.
It wasn't just him. Think about Athens, the birthplace of democracy, right? But during the Peloponnesian War, they basically defeated itself.
The Sicilian expedition.
Yep, exactly. This incredibly ambitious campaign, far from home, deep in Sicily. Gaddis traces it back partly to Pericles' earlier stance, that principle of no concession, even on small things. It created this slippery slope where Athens just kept reaching further and further, way beyond its resources, total overreach, devastating defeat.
And then there's Napoleon in Russia, 1812.
Yeah.
Marches in with, 600,000 men?
And maybe 90,000 come back, just catastrophic. Gaddis says Napoleon rose so far above fundamentals as to lose sight of them altogether.
Like Xerxes, he thought sheer willpower could overcome what Gaddis calls friction.
Explain friction again.
It's just the inherent messiness of reality, especially in war. The mud, the bad weather, disease, miscommunication, supply problems, tired soldiers, all the unpredictable stuff that gums up even the best plans. Napoleon tried to just intimidate his way through it.
But it didn't work. The Russian retreat turned into this grinding resistance. His army just dissolved from exhaustion and the cold. It proves that unchecked ambition leads to collapse.
We saw with Philip II of Spain, too, sending the Armada against England.
Driven by his hedgehog conviction, restoring Catholicism, God's mission for him.
But he lost track of what he had to do, practically. He micromanaged, didn't properly assess the capabilities needed for such a massive aspiration. Another victim of overreach.
Even Alexander the Great, often hailed as this military genius.
He also learned limits only through failures. He pushed his troops relentlessly until they finally just refused to go any further deep in India.
And Gaddis notes he didn't long survive the realization that they weren't the same. His boundless ambition and their human limits. He died young, exhausted, disappointed, having spent his life confusing aspirations with capabilities.
Wow. So when you look around today, you see modern versions of this, right? Companies expanding way too fast, collapsing under their own weight.
Or nations getting stuck in forever wars, these long, costly conflicts with no clear endpoint, because the initial goals were perhaps too ambitious or ill-defined.
It really highlights how blurry that line is between bold, visionary leadership and just destructive pride, hubris. When does drive become a fatal flaw? Is caution always better? Or do you need to take big risks sometimes?
It's a tough call. So in your own projects, your own ambitions, how do you spot those warning signs? The subtle clues that maybe your reach is exceeding your grasp before you commit too far down a path of overreach. It's easy to judge Xerxes or Napoleon in hindsight.
Much harder when it's you in the moment.
Exactly. Which brings us nicely to our fourth and final theme from Gaddis, the contrast between strategic patience and impulsive action. This is all about the art of timing.
Knowing when to wait, when to move.
And how to handle uncertainty without getting paralyzed, knowing when to wait, when to act, and where to seek reassurance.
Lincoln, yet again, is a masterclass here. Strategic patience personified. Apparently, after one impulsive speech early in his career, he learned his lesson. He wisely took his time building his base.
Right. He let his opponent, Stephen Douglas, kind of self-destruct with his popular sovereignty idea. Lincoln waited for the contradictions to become obvious.
And during the Civil War, his one war at a time policy was genius. He avoided getting dragged into a war with Britain over the Trent affair, kept things limited in Mexico, laser focus on the main goal, saving the Union.
And the timing of the Emancipation Proclamation, waiting until it could be framed as a military necessity that served that primary goal. Pure strategic patience. Gaddis says Lincoln kept it on his side. He knew how to wait, when to act.
FDR showed similar restraint, didn't he? Despite knowing the threats from Germany and Japan were growing.
He waited. He patiently built up American strength, supported allies selectively, but he waited for America's own Fort Sumter, as Gaddis puts it.
A clear attack that would unify the country.
Which came with Pearl Harbor and then Hitler declaring war on the U.S. That patience meant he entered WWII with overwhelming public support. He understood America needed rearmament that would restore prosperity and still hold out the hope of not going to war until absolutely necessary.
He even strategically allowed his autocracy, meaning the Soviet Union, would do most of the fighting needed to save the American and British democracies in the early stages against Hitler. A calculated, patient gamble.
Contrast that patience with figures like Antony versus Octavian again.
Right. Antony was all empty flourishes, impulsive actions. Gaddis says he sought out swamps, sank into them, and then got bored with them, just reacting, no long game.
While Octavian seized opportunities while retaining objectives, he stuck to his compass heading while avoiding swamps. Patient, purposeful action.
Even Elizabeth I's dithering, which we mentioned earlier, that was strategic patience, keeping options open, pivoting when needed. She understood, as Gaddis quotes, the calamitous effects of too great a precision and too great a decisiveness in political life. Sometimes waiting is the strategy.
And the flip side, Napoleon's impatience. His irritation leading to rash decisions, his failure to see the Russian retreat for the trap it was, classic impulsive action leading to disaster.
You know, it's funny, hearing about Philip II micromanaging or Napoleon's impatience makes me think of trying to plan group vacations.
The parallels are everywhere, aren't they?
Totally. Trying to force every detail, getting frustrated when things don't go exactly to plan. Obviously lower stakes. But that impatience, that lack of strategic waiting, it trips us up, even in small things.
Absolutely. And in bigger things, too. Think about long-term investing versus day trading, patience versus impulse, or complex international negotiations. The patient diplomat often wins against the impulsive one.
But it raises that question again. Is waiting strength or weakness? In today's world, everything moves so fast. Is patience still viable, or does the first mover advantage always win out?
It's a real tension. So, for you, listening, when is it really strategic to wait, even if every fiber of your being wants to jump in and act? And maybe more importantly, how do you cultivate that kind of patience when everything pushes you to hurry?
That's the million-dollar question.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here, navigating through Gaddis's take on grand strategy. From Xerxes' epic fail
to the strategic brilliance of Lincoln and FDR.
What really stands out is how these core tensions just keep repeating, doesn't it? Ends versus means.
Hedgehog versus fox.
Avoiding overreach.
And mastering patience versus impulse. They're timeless dilemmas.
Gaddis wraps it up nicely, suggesting that, as a species, we've survived partly because we've learned, however imperfectly, to blend the hedgehog and the fox, to keep rethinking core assumptions while still holding on to a basic worldview.
He brings in Edmund Burke, too, reminding us that the thing bought must bear some proportion to the purchase paid. It all comes back to that fundamental alignment, potentially infinite aspirations with necessarily limited capabilities, knowing your limits, but also knowing your direction.
knowing when to push, when to adapt, and yeah, when to just wait.
It's grand strategic common sense, really.
So what does this all mean for you? How can you take these insights, the strategic common sense, and apply it to your own life, your career, your personal goals, maybe even how you think about politics?
It's worth considering Clausewitz's paradoxical trinity of war. This idea that any major strategic undertaking involves not just rational calculation, reason, and practical ability, skill, but also the unpredictable element of human passion, emotion, chance.
You have to account for all three: reason, skill, and passion. In war, in business, in life.
The world is complex. Gaddis quotes Clausewitz saying 3/4 of it is wrapped in a fog. Uncertainty is baked in.
But maybe, just maybe, by learning from these patterns, these successes and failures across history, we can get a little better at navigating that fog. We can hopefully avoid our own personal Hellespont and learn to appreciate the real power of strategic thinking.
A valuable goal indeed.